Okay, so welcome everyone. It's our last quarterly deep dive of 2024, but lovely to see you all here. And thanks for being with us throughout 2024. It's been a really great year. And what we want to do in today's session is take you through some of the highlights of that year. So we're going to take you through some of the numbers that we've got through TED, look at some of the data, and talk to you about the journey that we've been on so far. I know some of you, this might have been your first year with TED. You might just be sort of setting out on your TED journey, and others of you have been with us for a few years now. So you've seen these types of things before, and you've been part of that journey we've all been on together. So it's wonderful to bring you all together for events like this. Our main sort of focus topic and our sort of breakout groups and discussions in the second half of today's session will be around AI. So Sam and I are going to demonstrate some of the things that we've been tinkering around with AI, of how it's helped us and some of the potential it has. And then following that, after a short break, we're going to have a chat ourselves around any ideas you have around AI, maybe how you might already be using it, or maybe any concerns that you've got as well, and things we need to be wary of as we start to use AI more and more. It seems to be coming on so fast. And I think thinking back to this time last year, I might have only heard it for the first time and just had a bit of a dabble with something like ChatGTP, but it seems to be everywhere now. So who knows where we'll be this time next year. But as always, we'll be sharing everything from today's session. So we're recording it now, and we'll send out that recording to all our collaborative members, along with the slides and any support resources that we share with you today. Sort of collaborative ethos is around being present and curious. Feel free to participate and share. That's what it's all about. We do this together. Listen actively and respect others, and be creative and solution focused. And that really is the ethos that we always have at these collaborative events, and that's why they're so good and they've been so useful for us as we've journeyed ahead. So our first topic really is just to introduce you to some of the new toolkits and new features that we've got. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to showcase some of those now, including our new enhanced reporting dashboards. And I know some of you, we've given you sneak peeks of these before, but we're so pleased that that's gone live now. And some of the eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed that they've been on since earlier on this week. So you might have already had a bit of a tinker around with that. But I'll showcase some of the things that are in there, and give you a chance to think about how you might use it in your organization as well. So first up though, we're going to look at some of our newest toolkits. And as I said earlier, our newest member of the team, Lindsay's been working with me on some resources around sustaining change for teams. I think one of the sort of core factors of TED has always been around this idea of continuous improvement. And one of the, I guess, challenges we wanted to solve when we first developed TED was being able to make change sustainable, so that it wasn't just sort of quick fixes for teams, so that it gave them some structure to keep going. And that's definitely influenced these resources that Lindsay's been working on for us since she's joined the team. So our first one is a step-by-step guide for team leaders. And the idea with this is this takes on board different change models that we had a look at, and it gives some step-by-step points of how a team leader might embed TED into a change management process, and also the sort of key steps that are involved in making that change sustainable and keeping change sort of, I guess, not reverting back to the way things were before change. So the idea with this is it's a resource leaders can use, they can share with the teams, and they can take a step-by-step approach. It references key elements of TED in there, so they can understand how TED fits as part of that continuous improvement cycle. And to complement this resource, I'll just scroll over to the right. Here we go. We've also got a bit of a, I guess it's a bit of a team poster. You could use this to bring it up on screen in a team session, or use it as a something to put up in a team area to think around how does that TED cycle fit and what are the key parts in there around how do we sort of keep our plan in action, how do we keep that momentum, and how do we use TED as part and parcel of that. So the intention with this resource is it could be used to prompt a team conversation around the different stages of change, or it could be used as a regular reminder that teams might check back in on to think around where they're at in the TED cycle, but also how the change is going, and when it's right to repeat TED, I guess, and keep that cycle going. So yeah, Helen, I've noticed you've asked if it's in the toolkit. So yeah, it's not on the site yet. We will share it after today's session with the resources, but it will be going on the site in the very near future as well. So you'll have it there to download and use and to share with your teams as well. So great resources and massive thanks to Lindsay for pulling these together. And our next one, another one that Lindsay's been working on. This one is linked to the Civility Saves Lives program. And this resource is all around having those civility conversations in your team. We've already got a handful of resources around this topic on TED, but we wanted to create something which gave some sort of simple questions that a team could use and things that you could embed into an existing team meeting, or definitely I think for those teams who might be stretched, they could perhaps just look at one of these questions every day in a morning team brief, or they could tackle these as a whole. And the intention with this is that team leaders and teams can ask themselves these sorts of questions on what are the behaviours that really personify the team we want to be, but also what are the behaviors that might undermine what we do, and think around how we come across to others outside of our team. So as I say, we've got resources along this lines in TED, but I think this one does a really good job of sort of distilling that down into a manageable conversation, things that can be broken down into a sort of quick check-in on some of the key things. And maybe a team might use these as maybe a question each week for the team to ponder on and think about over the course of the week and come up with their ideas ready for the next meeting, where you sort of share those suggestions around what are those key behaviors that we really want to see, how can we perhaps support each other in those behaviors, and also I think how can you positively challenge as well. So yeah, absolutely, some really great questions in there, and again, another big thanks to Lindsay who's been working on this one. And then the final one, if I can just scroll across a little bit. Oh, it's not working for me, bear with me. Oh, I've not opened the final one. We do have another one, which is around delegating within teams. And I know, Helen, you're in the room today. I think Helen from South Yorkshire ICB, you asked me about this one, to if we had a TED resource on effective team delegation, and although I don't have it to hand, this is one that we can share as well. So it's around those sort of key points that team leaders can take around effective delegation. So it offers some key steps and some key questions that a team leader can ask a team, and big thanks to Helen for suggesting that one, and it's something we were able to pull together from some existing resources we have, but again I suppose a leadership focused resource that we can use. So yeah, big thanks to Helen, and I'm glad you found it useful as well. So yeah, just an insight there into some of our newest toolkits. And again, as with all these things, you help us come up with these ideas of what are the things that teams are asking for, what's really relevant to your teams, and what might help them through some of the challenges that they may have. So big thanks to you all who've sort of provided us with feedback that's helped us sort of create these things, and keep those suggestions coming in, because it does help us keep enhancing the system. Okay, so next little bit is around our enhanced reporting dashboards. So as I mentioned, this is something we've been working on through most of 2024, really trying to get it right and trying to give you the information that can help you with that decision making around TED. So as of Tuesday this week, you may have noticed in the reporting section, when you log into TED with your Trust Admin account, you will now get a different version of our reporting dashboards. So when you log in here, I'm on my test database now, but it will tell you, first of all, at the top, it will tell you your trust end date. So that's essentially when you contracted up to on TED. So you can just have that in mind. But the key things are this headline data here. So when you set off, it will give you sort of the high level numbers across all of your data that's in your TED database around how many team leaders are on your particular system, the total number of surveys that have been done, total number of survey responses, and the team leaders who don't have any TED set up. And the intention with that is if this number starts to get quite high, it might tell you that there's sort of room for maybe reaching out to some of those team leaders. And through the user export, which we brought in earlier this year, you can download that list of users on the system, so you can give them that nudge, maybe offer some support or get some feedback on what might be a challenge for them in implementing TED. Where this then comes to the next level is you then get a snapshot of that same data, but over the last 12 months. So you can start to see, okay, is our activity growing year on year? And what are the sort of key headlines? And I think this is useful when you come to reporting on TED, when you're trying to sort of prove impact and prove the amount of engagement you've had with TED. You'll start to see these numbers going up. As I say, I'm just in my test database in at the minute, so there's only 2 on that one, but I'd expect your numbers will be higher than that, and you'll sort of see the amount of team leaders you've trained through that, but also the amounts of surveys and survey responses that are in there as well. So you can start to get some of that high level data. I shared this briefly at our coffee catch up on Tuesday, and someone asked a really good question around, does this in any way filter out test surveys or demo surveys we might have done as part of training? And the answer to that is yes, it does. Any surveys with less than 3 responses are not included in this data. So if you've set some up that haven't really got any traction or haven't converted into what we would class as a real TED with enough responses, then it won't impact on that overall organizational data. Sam, did you want to come in at that point?
Yeah, I'm just conscious as well, some clients have set up a division that does have test data in that might have more than 3 in if they've put together one that they like to use. So if you did have that and you have your own test division, you could probably look at your numbers there at a high level and then perhaps do the drop down to the different division. I'm just thinking, I know Liverpool, Oliver, you had your own test division, don't you? You could then perhaps go to test division, quickly have a look at what that's in, and you could very quickly do the maths if you have got that set up in place.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Sam. And yeah, as Sam says, on this drop down box you've got here, it defaults to show you the whole organization. But if you want to filter any of this database, you could put, obviously you might have a demo division, but let's say we just wanted to look at corporate services here. We can see the numbers change and it gives me a snapshot of what the data is for that particular division. As we scroll down, it gives you some more, I guess, some more sort of showcasey sort of graphs that can help you sort of illustrate this if maybe you're presenting to maybe a divisional stakeholder or a senior decision maker who wants to know what that data is telling them. And in here you can see an overview of the numbers of TEDs that have been created month on month. So that's similar to the graphs that were already there in TED, but we've tried to sort of streamline this so you can see that comparison to last year, so you can see if there are certain months where there are peaks and troughs, if there are other months where you perhaps want to push more with TED, and if you're improving based on last year. And that's what we encourage with TED. That sort of year-on-year growth creates that sort of organic growth throughout your organization. We then drill down into that a little bit further, so you get quarterly growth stats, and you can filter this so it defaults onto TEDs created, but you can look at follow-up TEDs in terms of that repeat TED process. You can look at participation numbers as well, your percentages of participation, and number of team leaders created as well. Quite low on the test database, but you can get an idea there, the amount of people that you're training and who are getting access to your system. You also get that in a number format here as well, in case that's a bit more useful to export to a spreadsheet or another sort of presentation that you might be doing. We also get an overview of our sort of headline score trends. So the top 4 factors that are on your TED report, you get an overview of these on a monthly basis. Again, just to sort of identify trends, which of these might be higher than others, which might be a little bit lower. And so you can start to look at that against things like your staff survey results to see what those sort of year-round trends might be. We also get our TED theme scores, which you get on your main dashboard, and we get this sort of spider diagram as well. So if I click on here, you can look at all divisions, or maybe compare that to just corporate services. Let's try another one, diagnostics in here. So it just helps you get a comparison against different areas of your organization. And I think our intention with this is you might see that maybe one area of your organization performs particularly well in one particular area. So maybe working with other teams here might be seen as a strength for the diagnostics division. So it might be cause to go and talk with them, work with teams in that division to say, what is it about the way you collaborate? Is there anything that we can learn and share with other teams? Similarly, if there's any weaker areas, so maybe this review and celebrate success might suggest we want to try and offer some of our recognition programs to this particular division. So it's helping us target that support from an OD and support practitioner perspective. And finally, at the bottom, you will be able to sort of date filter your TED information. I'll not do this on my TED database because it doesn't fully come up, but I'd encourage you to have a look at this, and it will tell you for different date ranges, your highest scoring questions and your lower scoring questions within the TED system. So if you wanted, you could look at that year on year to see if it's shifted from last year maybe, but it also helps you highlight the things which you're doing really well at as an organization, or things that might be a particular challenge that maybe you want to provide extra support for, or extra advice to team leaders, or maybe showcase some of the TED toolkits that relate to those particular questions as well. So that's just a sort of a sneak peek, but we're excited to see what you can do with this data. Really, I think whenever we talk to our developers, the answers they always give us to these sorts of questions is that the data's in there. We just need to know how you want to use it and what's the best way to show it. So I think thank you for all your feedback you've given us throughout this year. That's helped us to get it to this stage, and we're excited to see how you might use it and how it can complement the work that you do. Fab. So I will just come back to my slides there. There we go. And on the theme of data, I wanted to share some of our headline data. So this year has been one of our most successful in terms of TED numbers. We've had 3 new organisations join our TED collaborative, and we're very pleased to be welcoming Dorset County, Greater Manchester Mental Health and Sheffield Children's Hospital, who we're onboarding over the next month into the new year. I've personally welcomed over 61 colleagues this year who've been trained as accredited TED practitioners in 2024, and we've had almost 2,000 team leaders trained across our collaborative network. This year we've had almost 1,500 TED surveys completed, and that's included over 12,000 survey responses. So we're really starting to hit those big numbers now in terms of the amount of people that we're impacting on with TED. So it's really starting to get impressive. And in terms of our collaborative, we've run 22 events, including things like this, quarterly deep dives, our monthly coffee catch-up events, and lunch and learn events to help support you in using TED with your organisation. This has also been our first full year of having our own TED YouTube channel. So far we've got 23 videos, including things like event recaps. We've got how-to guides on there, and TEDcast episodes aimed at team leaders. We've had 790 unique viewers in 2024, And our most popular videos have been the ones around multi-factor authentication, which we introduced this year, creating follow-up surveys with TED, and also around dealing with difficult feedback as well. And that's been very popular with team leaders who've needed that extra bit of support and guidance around those challenging conversations that could arise. So if you've not checked out our YouTube channel, I'd encourage you to take a look, as we're building a host of resources that could be useful for you and your teams to watch and share. And we're looking to add to that all the time and keep growing that as a go-to library of resources. In terms of our journey, we're now coming into, it feels really scary this, we're coming into our 9th year with TED. It is starting to make me feel a little bit old, but it's also the 4th year with our collaborative. And since its inception in 2016, we've aimed to create something which builds the capability and capacity for engagement work across NHS teams. With your help, TED has grown to become something that we could never have imagined nearly a decade ago now. It's helped teams maximize their potential. It's helped them overcome challenges. It's helped them reflect and celebrate their achievements together. And you have helped us enhance our system to improve our resources, ensuring TED stays relevant to the way that teams work today. You've also helped us improve our reporting features, as you've just seen, and that's helping us improve the way that TED informs strategic decision making and complementing our other sort of engagement measures that we might have in our organisations as well. So we're really pleased with what we've achieved with TED, and we're really excited for the future with you all as well. In terms of what those numbers look like year on year, we've seen more team leaders engage with TED year on year, and you can see that this year we've hit our highest ever numbers. And when we start to look at the amount of TED surveys across our collaborative, we've seen this grow exponentially over the last few years. So it's really exciting to see that year on year you getting more and more teams to use TED, more and more teams coming back to TED that might have used it in the past, and building those positive habits. And that translates into huge amounts of people who've engaged with TED, and it's setting records every year. Again, we're getting that exponential growth where it's sort of more than doubling year on year. So it's really exciting for us to see that, and really encouraging that so many are getting to use TED to help the way they work in their team. And what that means is that since our collaborative began, we've now worked with over 30 NHS organisations, as well as some of our organisations outside the NHS. And our collaborative has now almost 200 members who've completed accreditation training and who are supporting teams across the NHS in the work. We've had over 4,000 team leaders trained to use TED, and over 2,000 surveys have been completed, including almost 20,000 survey responses. So really, really huge numbers. And today is our 64th TED event since the collaborative began. And we're really excited to see where we can take TED next in 2025. So with all that in mind, we'd like to say a massive thank you to everyone who's worked to make the TED Collaborative what it is today. Everyone who's been part of our journey. You've helped us learn, you've helped us grow, and you've helped us succeed in improving the work and the working lives of thousands of colleagues across the NHS. So a huge thank you to you all for being part of that. And we're really excited for the future. Fab, thank you everyone. Lots of lovely messages coming in the chat. And I'm going to hand over to Sam now. So our main focus today is on AI. Sam, would you like to go in?
Yeah, I was just thinking, just those figures themselves, sort of how they might be useful, you know, if I was working in a trust that was introducing TED or still in that year 1, year 2, sort of how could some of that data be helpful in terms of engaging your stakeholders if you're at the start of your journey, giving a sense of confidence that this is a tool that's being used quite widely, I was thinking of the consultants that I did the quick introduction for when you were on leave, weren't you? Sort of how it can potentially build their confidence. Often they might be a skeptical group, perhaps, and particularly have queries around anonymity and things like that. So actually demonstrating the level at which TED is working, not just in the trust, but actually externally, and how that might have a positive impact on engaging with those advocates in your trust that you're trying to gather. So yeah, I was just going to mention that. We can make sure you get the copy of the data if it's useful. So we're talking about AI. This is the latest topic that keeps coming up in our trust. I don't know about you. Does anybody else find that AI seems to be spoken about quite a bit? I don't know if anybody has had it come up recently in their own trust. We've particularly even had comments around like how could AI from our education colleagues and other L&D focused colleagues, sort of, could it help with marking? Could it do this? Could it be the answer to this? I've just been given a pro account on on Teams actually. I don't know why or who decided to grace me with that. But every meeting that I go to that's recorded, for example, this meeting now, I will get a summary that is provided by AI, and it also lists any actions. So if you say in a meeting that's recorded, oh, we need to take that as an action, I then get a summary at the end that comes up that says, here's all the actions from that meeting, which is absolutely incredible. So hopefully that will be rolled out across teams generally. I just think it's so time saving. And I think where I started with AI, I think you introduced it to me, Lee. You first said, have you heard of ChatGPT? And I think I felt a bit guilty using it, like a bit of a shame, like I should be able to do this work myself. I shouldn't be using a computer. Am I cheating by using AI? But I think where I am now is I literally have it open. It comes up every morning. It's one of my home pages. It automatically opens, and I can't tell you if there's been a day recently where I haven't used it for something. I just wondered if there's anyone else in the room here that's using it actively or is maybe just a bit curious. Does anybody want to share where they're currently at with AI? Or maybe pop it in the chat if you want to. Feel free just to jump in verbally as well if anybody does want to speak. Morning, Megan.
Yeah, I don't use it a lot, but we recently had a kind of team chat about how AI could be used in our team. And I do think using ChatGPT can be useful for if you want to kind of get some ideas going, like because when you're on your own, and you're not necessarily in a room with people, you might not have that ability to do the same brainstorming you might with other people. So I actually think that you can use it as a bit of a brainstormer if you're not coming up with ideas immediately. So I think it can be really good to create templates for you that you can then work from and like edit yourself, because I know it can make you feel a bit like you shouldn't be using it because you should write something yourself, or if you're writing an email that you're a bit worried about, you should be able to write it yourself. But if you actually use it as a template to create the kind of broad outline of what you want, and then write, it's never going to come up exactly with what you want, because you have to kind of fill in the blanks of how it's intended to be sent out, for instance. So I do think there's still a lot of your own work there, but I think it can be a good place to start from.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing, Megan. I agree with everything you said. Claire?
Yes, the colleague yesterday showed me ChatGPT, and I was like, wow. And we was looking at, she did it for like setting up a session, some ideas of how she might do a session with staff experience with staff survey results. And it just comes up with like session planning. I was like, wow, I'll be out of a job soon. But you're right, like Megan said, it gives you that starter, especially if you're like thinking, where do I start? So I think I'm going to be sharing that with my colleagues, because it's like magic.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I think exactly like you, Claire, like it's a great place to start, like Megan said as well. And I started to think about it in this, me, I love a spreadsheet. Do I feel bad that I'm using a spreadsheet to do my formulas and my calculations? No. Would I want to go and hand wash, even though we've got a washing machine? No. So it doesn't replace your thinking, and it doesn't replace your intelligence, but it certainly does help us to work smarter and faster. And when you're in our situation, which is some of the things I'm going to talk to you about now, in OD, we have a huge amount of reporting. It's increasing. Actually, I think I'm reporting more now than I've ever done before. I have 4 board reports a year, plus other things that I often get asked to contribute to last minute. I'm relying on it quite a lot. And it's not that I can't do the work. I know how to do a graph, I know how to do these things, but actually I can get it done a lot quicker. So I just thought I'd share a few examples of where I've used AI in OD work, rather than Lee's going to focus on TED after me. So some of the recent ones I'm going to share is around board reports, developing graphs, and some things that we did with a recent recognition activity. Shall I just click take control? I should be able to flick through then, shouldn't I? Okay, so in a recent board report, I had to very quickly pull together last minute all of our NQPS for so many years. I wanted to kind of make a comment. Well, first of all, I wanted to see if there was anything interesting in it before I then reported on it. So I quickly pulled together a table of all of our results, which is all on the external website as well, if you haven't got access to your NQPS results. And I pulled in the benchmark as well. And I just quickly said, and I thought I'd do it this way in case anyone's never used ChatGTP, but I just said, please, quite politely, please, can you analyze this data for me, indicate any trends, and just explain that, this one's my company and then the other one's a benchmark. And they were very happy to help me, was ChatGTP. It pulled it all in for me, and it was really useful. And although, like you said, Megan, some of the bits weren't correct and some of them I just didn't want to include in my report, oh my gosh, it really got me going. It definitely saved me a lot of time, and it did point out things that I hadn't seen, and certainly maybe if I'd had a day or 2 days to analyze the data to that level, I would have picked up. But in the time that I had to turn that report around, I didn't have that time. And then it's that idea of actually prompting it. So if you don't get the answer that you want from ChatGTP, what I've learned is you have to be quite specific and you have to keep asking questions. So as you can see on here, it gave me some general insights, and then I asked it to go off again. So, well, actually, what quarters was most positive? What was least positive? Because I was trying to work out, what we know is January is always the lowest scoring in NQPS, blah, blah. But I wanted to demonstrate that that was proof, and was there anything else? And then on the next slide, I wanted to know here, was there any clear patterns in the quarter? Because it wasn't quite giving me the answers that I was looking for. And then it obviously realized what I was trying to get to next, and it shared a bit more data. And then I dug a bit further and wanted to know whether there was a link between involvement, because one of the things that we talk about a lot at our trust is that when colleagues feel more involved, they are more likely to be engaged. So I wanted to know if the data around involvement was actually having an effect on advocacy, and was it having an effect on overall engagement. So I suppose the one thing I'm trying to show here is, once you start using ChatGPT, keep asking questions, keep digging a bit deeper, and it will do that for you. And then because I'd had this data in a table, and again, I was rushing, I thought, could it do me a graph? And yes, the answer is it does do graphs for you. So I just said, can you help me create a graph across these 3 quarters with the benchmark in? And it said, yeah, certainly, it's very nice, ChatGPT. And then it broke me up these, and I literally just clicked copy and paste, popped it in my report, and it was fantastic. It was exactly what I wanted to see. So I just thought I'd share those ideas as a suggestion. And then if I just share screen for a second, sharing here. Here's just some other things. So I hadn't even dropped it in a nice way. I'd literally copied and pasted the raw data in here, and it still managed to pick it up. So do have a go at using that. And it was able to create some general observations. It also then did a comparative analysis for me, and gave me some recommendations, not all which were right. The next thing I wanted to know was I pulled out our turnover as well. So if I just pull up our report for a second, and I popped in further down way. Sorry about this. Here we go. Lee, when we record this, will you be okay to put a blanco? Thank you. So then I pulled out all of our divisional data, the number of TEDs year on year, the turnover, average staff survey score, and then I broke down all the TED trends as well and the themes. And then I asked ChatGTP, can you tell me some observations? And it did. And whilst I needed to tweak them, it was actually really spot on, exactly what I needed for my report. So I just thought I'd share that as a suggestion. Maybe it's a quick win for you guys, but also the idea of looking at your data now that you've got that new dashboard. How could that be part of some of this work as well? What does that give you that could then maybe used with ChatGTP perhaps as well? The last thing I was just going to show you was other areas where I've used it. So from our finalists for the OPAs, I was running this event very last minute on my own, and I wanted to create my brochure. So I just copied and pasted all the nominations into ChatGTP or Copilot, and I asked them to create some summaries for me, which it did, and it was absolutely fantastic. And then I wanted a one quote, so I then said, can you now take that summary and break it down to one quote that I could put on the slides? And it did. Can't tell you how much time it saved me. And we also used AI as our voiceover as well, because the person who normally does the voiceovers weren't there, and we didn't have time to go and make sure that we had all the pronunciations correct. So we used ChatGTP as an AI voiceover, and then recorded that for the event as well. So just some bit different ideas of how you might use AI. And I think the only other one that I had to share was, no, that was it. The board reporting, some different elements of retention data that we'd used, and some recognition initiatives. So I'll let you share screen again, Lee. Oh, and I also use it for naming. Do you know when you've sat there for a while thinking, oh, what could we do for this? What could we call that? The amount of times that I've asked ChatGPT, like, give me 10 names for what you would call this manager's session about this. And it just gives you ideas as well. So those are some things from me. I don't know if anybody has any questions or any comments. And then if not, I'll hand back to you, Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And if anyone does have any questions, pop them in. We will be talking about those in the sort of second half of this session. But what I'd like to share with you now is opportunities maybe for how you might use some of this AI capability with TED. So first up, I'd like to share with you an example of a report. It might be a little bit hard to read, but I just want to sort of give you an overview. So this I've anonymized this report, but this is for a team that I worked with quite recently. These were a team who were doing a follow-up TED survey, and as you can see from this, they quite a lot of positives in the previous survey, some of which had gone down. Nothing really sort of serious, with no reds in this report, so still generally quite a positive TED report for this team. But the team leader approached me because they were a little bit concerned around some of the things that had declined, some of the challenges they were facing in the team in terms of stretched resources, feeling a little burnout in the team as well. There've been some changes in the team structure. So they'd done a TED to sort of check in on how they were doing. And sort of the things which sort of jumped out to me when I was looking at this TED, first of all, there's some really, really great positives. So things like question 4 there around work being meaningful. It had improved from an already high place last time, but 5 out of 5, very rarely see that on any team. But yeah, really great results there. But all the scores for team purpose, really positive there, that told me this is a team who really does value the work that they do. They worked in a clinical department, so they really valued that patient care. And again, that came across in the comments as well. So some of the advice that was given to this team leader was to sort of focus on that and remind the team of that, to get that foundation before you do tackle some of the areas that might be more challenging, to make sure the team feels on the same page and recognises that everyone's doing their best for the patients they have. Some of the concerns perhaps for this team might have been things more around the working together theme, and a little bit towards team communication, which had declined a little bit as well as team engagement and our trust specific questions that we've got LTH around civility and team culture. So again, as I say, although these were a little bit lower, not sort of huge concerns, but for this team, a team that is quite high performing, really high standards, they wanted to work on it, and the team leader definitely wanted to think around how they could address that. So what I did, I sort of signposted them to some of our TED resources around those culture conversations, thinking around those interpersonal behaviours and thinking around how they can support each other. And looking at the sort of things we could do to improve. Some of the comments mentioned things like communication. So again, I sort of advise them to reflect a little bit on perhaps what might have changed in terms of communication, different needs they might have, and ideas for how they might want to sort of try new things in the future. So that's an overview of what the TED report was telling me in the conversation I had with this team leader. So given that we were doing AI, I wanted to test this out and see what AI would come back with if maybe the team leader hadn't come to me and wanted to try and use this to complement their work. So using Microsoft Copilot, so I think if your organization has Office 365, you'll have access to Copilot. And if you just Google Microsoft Copilot, you'll get a login where you can put your trust credentials and get in. But what you can actually do on Copilot is you can ask it to analyze a document. So what I'm doing here is I'm dragging and dropping this TED report into there. And then I can ask it a question around this document. So I might ask, what are the main strengths of my and areas we can work on based on this report. Okay, so let's see what it gives us here. So live demo, you never know what you're going to get back. But it sort of pulls out some really good stuff. It analyzes your TED data. So this is just a PDF document, the normal TED export that I've dropped into there. And if I scroll up a little bit, what the AI is telling us is that team purpose is a real strength. So that definitely the same thing that I pulled out, they've got a clearly defined purpose and finds the work meaningful. It also references the questions that are saying that, so you can see what the TED data is telling it that's informing that. Things around role clarity as well. Leadership is identified as a strength. So question 17 and 18 scoring above 4, and the one around supported leadership. Question 19 scoring 4 as well. So it pulls out those key strengths. And also in valuing individuals, it shows that the team members do feel they've had enough resources. So that is a stronger one for the team around question 20, and 2021 is a little bit lower. Engagement as well, it pulls out those two with a 4. So it does very quickly sort of pull out the sort of key highlights from that TED data that you're putting in there. In terms of areas for improvement, we've got ones around respect and support. So these civility things are coming in, collaboration, so collaboration with other teams. So it's suggesting question 7 and question 9 are at a 3.4, and the ones around communication as well as some of the others that score a little bit lower in there. So you can see how it gives an overall summary, but there's still some requirement, I guess, from a team leader, if they were doing this, to decide on actually what are the right things to work on here. It does, however, it gives you a little bit of a summary, some key takeaways. So if I was the team leader looking at this, it'd be suggesting improving communication within the teams is essential, enhancing collaboration and boosting engagement. So the good thing about AI then is you can ask follow-up questions and take this conversation further. So it does suggest some down in here. So what strategies can we implement? How to improve team communication? Can you suggest activities for team building? So let's try the one on team communication, and we'll send that through and see what it suggests here. So here we go. So this is pulling out information that AI is finding on the web around suggestions for team-based communication. And we can see some very sort of useful things. So use the right tools. I guess that might be a TED tool as well. Implement communication tools, define communication protocols, encourage open and honesty, regular team meetings, foster team building. So it gives you, I guess, they're sort of very generic ideas because the AI doesn't know the context for this team. But what I thought about then was, what if this was a team who didn't have time to work on a huge change? What if I asked it something like, my team is really stretched for time. Which actions could we easily take to make quick improvements? Let's try that and see what we come back with. Okay, so it's coming out now with some more sort of tangible things that this team might want to do. Just scroll up. So things like daily stand-ups in there, maybe utilize things like instant messaging or think around how you use your tasks. So it's suggesting other things, setting clear expectations, encouraging open communication, sharing information. So lots of different sort of bite-sized suggestions. So really good things in there. And I guess this, for me, it presents lots of opportunities, lots of risks as well. So what I'd like us to think about in our sort of second half of the session is where we could use this, but also what some of the challenges might be around this, because I've got to the stage, obviously, I'm sort of familiar with asking the right types of questions and where I might get to. And also because I've seen lots of these sorts of things, a lot of these things might be things that are already included in the TED toolkit. But I'm familiar with sort of picking out the things that might be useful and perhaps moving past the things that might not really apply to a specific team. So I guess what I'd like us to think about today is how might this be used in practice, and also what support might we need to give our team leaders if we were suggesting use AI, and how could that complement. So that's just a sort of summary of how you can start to use it with TED. I guess from a practitioner point of view, in your perspectives, you could also use AI to look at things like your TED data exports as well. So just as in Sam's example, where she used some of our quarterly pulse survey data, you could input data maybe across multiple teams or departments into AI and ask it to look at that information to maybe identify trends or understand maybe which questions are performing well or not as well that you might want to work on. So lots of food for thought there. I'm going to stop sharing at that point, and what we're going to do is we are going to go for a break at this point. I just want to give you a chance to sort of digest what you've just seen, and how we use it. Looking at the time, we're about 5 to, so if we take a 15-minute break and come back for around about 10 past, and then we're going to go into our sort of roundtable session, looking at the strengths and weaknesses of this approach and thinking around what support we might want to give, and also how we can enhance what we've already got in TED with the use of AI. So I'll give you time to think about that, but we'll see you at 10 past. Thanks, everyone. See you soon. Okay, so yeah, well, welcome back, everyone. So having seen that demo of AI and learned how Sam used it, what we'd like to do in the second half of today's session is really get your views and start to think around what might AI and TED look like together. How can we use it? How can we maximize the opportunity with it, but also be wary of some of the risks? And how can we, I guess, really, how can we support our team leaders so that they don't fall into any of the pitfalls with AI, but also can help maximize their work with TED, because I do think there are lots of opportunities with it. Just thinking some of the things I didn't demo with you there, but I have sort of tried with TED. You can ask it things like, what sorts of questions could I ask my team to explore this particular topic? Or one I had with another team was when that question on resources was quite low. I asked the AI, well, I said to the AI, we don't have the ability to get more resources, because the AI was suggesting, oh, just get more resources. So I suggested we don't have access to additional resources. So how can I make the most of the resources that we have? And it did come out with some good suggestions and the sorts of things that I might suggest, or our TED toolkits might suggest as well. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm gonna share a whiteboard for you. What you might notice as well is some of the images that we've used on our slides today are AI generated. So the one in the circle there, I asked for a roundtable discussion on AI, and this is what it came back with. I think equally impressive as it is scary sometimes when it comes back with these sorts of things. But yeah, what we're going to do is a bit of a SWOT analysis exercise, and what this will hopefully do is help shape the way we use TED in the future. We've already spoken with our developers around opportunities to maybe embed some AI into the website and maybe have it draw from the existing TED toolkits in terms of the responses that it gives. But I'll bring up the whiteboard now. Here we go.
Just loading.
Yeah. Can everyone see that? Okay. Okay, fab. So I think you're all following my view. You should have access to add post-its and add comments on things and change things. Yep, Sam's testing it there, so everything's working fine. Wonderful. I can see everyone's sort of mouse pointers flying around, so you're accessing it okay. So what I've done here is I've put two different SWOT analyses. Analysis? I don't know. What's the word for two analysis? One around how it can support us as practitioners in our role in supporting other teams, and then secondly we'll move on to how it can support teams. And I think those are two very different questions, because ways we can use this to help maximize the data we've got in TED to help us think around how we support teams is one side of the sort of coin, and then the other side is to what extent are we comfortable advising team leaders to use this, and what perhaps are the risks and opportunities involved with both. So I think I've got you on follow me, so I'm just going to zoom in if I can on the first one, and we'll look at strengths and weaknesses first. So this is in terms of our role as TED practitioners, so our role as a support function helping teams to use TED. So what do people think? Feel free to pop your hand up if you've got any ideas, or add a post-it if you wish. Pop them on there, but Sam will capture things as you sort of share them. I guess, what are people's initial thoughts on this in terms of those strengths? Helen, would you like to come in?
I think the obvious one is saving time. Get a lot more done, be more productive.
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about your role as a support practitioner, how might it save you time, do you think?
Well, I work part-time as well, so that's going to be a massive help. Because you can get really bogged down in papers and reports and things like that. I did one for a part of a report the other day, and I thought, oh, this is only going to take me like 5-10 minutes, and just commenting on the OD bit, and it took me 45 minutes, an hour, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and I think that's something I think Sam and I have used it for. If you're wanting to get a message out there, but you're struggling to start sometimes, it can help to get those prompts from AI, as we're saying. I think Megan mentioned earlier how it can just start that thought process, and use it as a bit of a sounding board sometimes. If you want to jot down your initial rough draft of what you want to put around something, AI will help you refine it and make it into something that you're happy to present or send on. So yeah, great points. Lots coming into the sort of post-its. I can see people typing away. Any other thoughts that anyone would like to come in and share?
I've just added another one from my own perspective. I'm sure you guys all have plenty of notice, but I find in my world I get last minute requests. You don't know whether you get any of those, where if you did have the time, again, you would be able to analyze it, but when you get a message to say by Monday and it's Friday, could you do this please, or could you add in this to the report? So for me, it's also about that unplanned work as well, when you didn't have notice. We've got one here: bring the data to life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. You know, around bringing that data to life, it can help you think around what might sit behind the data. I guess if you ask it those questions, it could offer suggestions for what that data is actually telling you.
I would have found
Um,
that really useful when I was writing the business case for TED, because I did a lot of
okay.
time taking data out, but pulling stuff. But thinking back on it, it would have been lovely to be able to say, right, here's all our data. What can we tell the story? You know.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion, Claire. Yeah, frustrating that we haven't had it for longer a bit, I guess. Um, but I think what that does show is that opportunity for, you know, next time your contract's up for renewal, pulling the data that's already in TED and being able to use AI to quickly crunch a lot of data, because you'll have built that all up over several years. So being able to, you know, very quickly interpret that, it really does help you put that business case together, because it saves a lot of number crunching and playing around with spreadsheets and, you know, trying to present it in a way that will mean something to someone who's maybe not familiar with that data. So yeah, great suggestions there. And I can see we're already overflowing with suggestions.
Yeah.
Any stood out to you, Sam? Any others?
I think I'd added this, but someone else is just in the middle of saying the same thing. So spotting things that we might not initially see in the analysis, because you know you are limited, aren't you? Whereas an AI is probably doing it faster, quicker, and you know, let's be honest, probably a bit better than us, perhaps. So yeah, we definitely could spot things that we haven't seen before. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and
excellent
different.
point. Go on, Sam.
I was just going to say, and someone else has just added around sort of different types of activities. Because the toolkit in TED is extensive, isn't it? And sometimes it can be hard to even know what to look for. So AI might say a theme that might make them go and look for something different in the toolkit, perhaps.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess I haven't tried this one, but just the thought that's occurred to me is what you could do is, after you pulled in your TED report, pull in 3 or 4 of the toolkit resources and then ask the AI, which one do you think would work best for my team? Or how could I use these toolkit resources to help me? So there is opportunity to pull those resources in there as well. And yeah, I think the sort of general theme around these strengths looks as though it is around sort of saving time mostly, but also around helping you interpret data quickly. And I guess it's important to think about that in terms of the opportunities and the weaknesses around that. So if we, by all means, keep putting things in the strength, but if we move on to the weaknesses section now, where do you think there are weaknesses in this approach? Yeah, just take some time to pop those. Feel free to pop your hand up if you want to share any maybe concerns that you've got around using this approach from your own perspective. See some good suggestions coming in there. Yeah, Sam, you mentioned AI doesn't always understand the context. Yeah, I think that is a really important point to get across. And definitely when we are using it, I think some of that is around making sure we ask the right questions and provide the right information so that it gets a better view of the context. But I think where I perhaps does fall short is sometimes perhaps some of the more human factors and understanding the impact on people that certain decisions or certain processes might have. And definitely when you're doing something like just providing some data will only give you a snapshot of information. It doesn't understand the wider things that are perhaps going on in the organization or what might be influencing that data. So the AI can only sort of give what it feels is the best guess based on the information it's got. Any others standing out to you, Sam?
There was one here, you know, how reliant we might become on it. And I think that kind of goes nicely with the comment I also made. I think we've talked about this. Does it prevent team leaders from actually taking the time to digest the report themselves? So how do we make sure that they still do that work and do that thinking and don't just become too reliant on it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a big one, because we talked about in the first half of the session around TED is all about building that capacity and capability. And whilst the speed factor of AI might help to build some of that capacity, there's a danger that that might be at the cost of building that capability if we become too reliant on it. So yeah, excellent point. Any others standing out on that?
Yeah, some elements was around sort of it can be quite generic, and maybe high level. So again, it is what we talked about, those asking that questions, drilling down, and then I think that was it. Yeah, and just like it's not always going to be right, so you are going to have to double check, and you have to remember that. Just always have that in the back of your head, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. So I suppose it's understanding its limitations, some of it as well, isn't it? And using it as a tool, I guess, is what we're saying. So we'll move on now to opportunities and threats. So thinking first about opportunities. So based on what you've seen there and what Sam's demonstrated and what I've demonstrated, in what ways do you think you could use this? So maybe thinking ahead to 2025. What things could you use AI with that might really help the way that you work? Oh, I like that one, Sam. You've deleted your post-it note now, but you were talking about staff survey, free text comments, and yeah, I think having done that analysis myself in the past, it can just take ages to read through everything, and from your staff survey provider, you don't get much other than just just all the comments together. So it's really hard to sort of break that down into maybe themes that are coming along and, things you want to pull out of it. I don't know, Sam, what's your thoughts on that? I know you've done that, the most recent ones.
Yeah, we did it manually, going line by line, theming every single comment. So I don't think we'll be doing that this year. I don't want to not read them though. So I do think there's something about reading it myself, but then adding it in, and I'll probably use Copilot rather than ChatGTP. I was comfortable using the NQPS data in ChatGTP because it's out there in the public domain anyway. But the free text comments where I don't know, so I'll put that in threats actually. Sort of I don't know what might be in some of those free text comments, and it could be something around a patient. It could, it could be anything. So I think there's something safer about using Copilot because it's Microsoft and it's part of our internal offer, isn't it, on the 365?
Yeah. Just looking at some of the others, someone's put analysis of multiple data sources to correlate them. Yeah. Would anyone like to come in who's thought that? What sorts of data sources are you thinking of that you might be able to combine?
That was my suggestion, Lee. So
Yep.
I was thinking about correlating, for example, NHS staff survey scores with team leaders who are currently using TED, with staff absence, staff turnover, all those different metrics. It feels like, and yeah, even like exit interview comments and things like, I've got multiple sources of data, but I need to kind of combine them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thought, and I'm sure AI probably is capable of that. But it does seem like a bit of a minefield, is it? I know something we talk about a lot in our OD team is how can we get all these bits of data in around things like retention, staff survey, TED, like say leave exit interviews, freedom speak up, all these sort of things that help to build up that picture of what's going on in our organization. It would be so useful if we could quickly pull all that together. And again, I suppose going forward that could well be possible. But yeah, it's very complex, isn't it?
It feels a bit mind-boggling, but it would be fantastic.
Yeah.
I think just thinking about it, my experience using it, my gut would be that you would need to pull all that together in raw text into like a Word document. So I don't know, TED Division 1, TED Division 2, TED Division 3, then Leaver Survey Division 1, Leader Survey Division 2, Leader Survey. So as long as I think that you kept that consistent format, AI would probably be able to look at the staff survey at that level quite well. I would put my money on it.
Yeah, and some other good suggestions in here. Someone's put an analysis of how much TED is being used across teams in the trust, taking data from the TED dashboard. Yeah, so I suppose that's sort of building on to the next level from the dashboards you've got in TED and thinking around what are perhaps those trends. So you might want to look at that year on year. And I think in Sam's example, ChatGTP even drew some graphs for her. So it might help you present that data in different ways. I've noticed someone else has put more dynamic and engaging portrayal of data for reporting. So yeah, I think the opportunity there to present data in different ways, maybe creating graphs that can help others understand what that data is telling you, can really be useful. So yeah, excellent point. Wow, so some more just coming in on the opportunities, but let's move to the threats now. I think we've already talked a little bit about some of those, but what are the potential pitfalls of this for yourselves as an OD practitioner, as a TED support practitioner? What could be threats around this? And I guess what are the risks around it is what we're asking here. And just while you're adding those, I noticed, Sam, you put using AI for reading academic resources as well. Yeah, it's good for pulling in information from background resources and summarizing academic reports as well. Yeah, really useful for that sort of thing. Okay, so looking at threats, I think, Sam, you put the one around using Copilot instead of ChatGTP for safety sharing data. Yeah, so I think something we haven't mentioned too much, but something we need to be mindful of is the confidentiality of the data that we're putting into there. And something like ChatGTP uses it on an external server. It's not something which is an organization funded device. It's just out there in the open. So we do need to be mindful of the sorts of things we share with AI. And that's why for those of us that do have a Microsoft 365 subscription, Copilot is under that umbrella of your organizational license. So it's a little more secure in terms of that way. But I guess what we're highlighting there is those threats in terms of how data is used and being clear on your data management policy and the types of information you do put in there. And while something like a TED survey might be okay because it's pretty much anonymized, you do need to be careful for things like the free text comments that could expose an individual that you might not want to share in that way. Any others sort of standing out to you, Sam?
Yeah, I think someone has mentioned around sort of leaving us vulnerable to cyber attacks, just as you mentioned. And then it's that back to the managers and, are they going to pay attention to the right things potentially? Would they just look at the headline rather than going into the detail? And would they go off in the wrong direction? Maybe a bit easier. How do we support them to ask the right questions? Is that something that we can do maybe from a central place, sort of coming up with some good tested questions? And then I've just added longer term thinking, how could AI change our roles going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that's a risk, isn't it? The threat, I think Claire, you said before, it could be sort of taking our jobs, if it gets any more sophisticated. But I suppose the sort of the sort of reality is that it probably will change our jobs, definitely, because there'll be different types of work that we need to do. And I think definitely when you work in OD, a lot of the sort of value that we add to other teams is that sort of people focused. And as much as AI might help you ask the right questions and might help to structure some of the work that you do, I don't think it can fully replace that sort of emotional intelligence that you have, especially when you're working with teams who are particularly challenged, and just giving them a set list of step-by-step things to do isn't necessarily what what teams want all the time. Sometimes it is just that ability to be able to listen and understand before making those suggestions. So yeah, I think that's a really good point. Fab. So some great things there. Do feel free to keep adding onto that, but I'm going to move now to our second one. So the second one over here is thinking about this more through the lens of a team leader and a team as well. So thinking about the strengths, if I was a team leader doing TED with my team, or I was a team member and I've got my TED data, what are the strengths of using AI for me and my team? Pop your ideas in there. Again, feel free to come in if you want to share something, if there's any sort of insights that have cropped into your head as we've been going throughout today's session. Justine, I think that's you typing. Yeah, quick analysis of TED results and comments. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it definitely sort of speeds up that process, I would say. And I guess what we've always tried to strive for with TED is keeping that report as simple as possible so that it is quite quick to pull out the sort of key headlines. But I'm always conscious that in my role, I look at an awful lot of TED reports, so it's perhaps easier for me than it would be for a team leader who's brand new to TED and who might just be faced with this report and having to sort of read and digest what it's telling us. So yeah, definitely, I think it can definitely speed up that analysis part of it. Sam, you mentioned about the free text themes.
Yeah, I think yeah, and that's also someone else has mentioned, yeah, reducing that time taken on that. I was also thinking about, and I think we do this ourselves, if you see a particular comment, you can focus in on that one comment, and then how could that potentially cloud your judgment of the themes, because it is quite personal for a team leader. So I was just wondering if, you know, obviously reading it first yourself, getting your own responses, but how could AI perhaps give you a more, it's subjective, no, I'm thinking of the wrong words, apologies, but you know, like more of an external view of what the free text comments are saying. So maybe just taking out some of that personal and emotional aspect of hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Sam, and I think that's the way that AI is sort of helping us get past one of our weaknesses as a human looking at those sorts of responses, that I think it's human nature to want to gravitate towards the comments, and also human nature to dwell on perhaps some of the more negative things, and it's difficult sometimes to look at it holistically. So AI does quite a good job of sort of boiling that down to a summary of what it all says. Megan, did you have your hand up briefly there, or do you want to come in?
Yeah, it's kind of just responding to what you were just saying, but I think I'm not sure which way round would be better to advise for leaders to kind of either put the analysis into AI first, an AI tool first, or to look at the results themselves first and then maybe use AI. It's kind of hard to know which is the better way round, because on the one hand, you want the team leader to take the initial role of understanding their team, but at the same time, as you say, AI might well be able to kind of stop them from having that emotional engagement first. So maybe doing that first and then kind of going back with that eye. It's kind of, I don't know which is the better way of doing it.
Yeah, but I think that's a really good point, and I don't know. I wouldn't like to say which is the best way, and I think this is where it does sort of present those opportunities to maybe trial out different approaches with maybe a team or a team leader that is mature enough to understand if it doesn't quite work right, that they can work around it. And I guess it might be one of those cases where the answer is different for different types of teams. But yeah, really good point. Lindsay, would you like to go in?
Yeah, just from obviously my perspective, from being like working with a team leader and TED in our organisation, I found that the team leaders can lack a bit of confidence and they want that bit of reassurance. So maybe they may just put some questions or thoughts that they may be having in asking certain questions to the team or approaching certain subjects, and just maybe something may just clarify something that they already think and believe, and just give them that confidence to then go and report that back to the team, so they could use it from that positive perspective as well.
Definitely, yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think a lot of the work we do with TED, often with teams who are in the first or second TED cycle, is about building that confidence, reassuring them that they are interpreting the report right and that they're doing the right thing. So yeah, I think that's a great point, that AI can help to sort of reinforce those sorts that team leaders might already have. But it just reinforces that they're doing the right thing or they're taking the right steps. So yeah, excellent point. I don't know, Sam, any others that we've not touched on yet? No, I think we've sort of generally gone through those. So we'll move on to the weaknesses now. So what are the, I guess, what are the drawbacks? Or where are the limitations? Oh, go on, Sam. Well,
I was
people
just
are tapping
thinking, could this re-engage team leaders as well? Like this idea of, if they've done TED in the past, how do we get them back to the table? Like, oh, this time use AI with your TED. So there you go. I'm going to add that one in.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, and I think I know definitely from our team leaders in our trust, when we launched our new TED website and it was all sort of shiny and new, and we had new sort of branding and logos and stuff. So that did give us a boost in terms of our TED numbers. So we saw teams who perhaps hadn't engaged with TED for a while come back to it, and team leaders who'd maybe been a little bit on the fence suddenly feel a bit more excited by it. So I think definitely AI could be another sort of shot in the arm to sort of give teams that extra nudge or add that bit of excitement around, oh, let's go and try this. It's something new that could really help us. So yeah, excellent point. Okay, yeah, so keep adding in things in terms of the weaknesses. I can see some people typing away there. Feel free to pop your hand up if you want to come in with any of these points. So someone's mentioned that it feels impersonal. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think that's where I come back to what we're saying around sort of our role is often that sort of emotionally intelligence and understanding what situation a team leader might be in when they come to TED, because I think although we don't say to team leaders that they have to access coaching around their TED, coaching can be a really important part of that process for a team leader, particularly if the results are quite tricky, that it needs someone else to help support them through what might be some challenging feedback, or to help reassure them. And whilst AI might suggest the right things, it does feel very impersonal if it's just coming up in text-based form. It doesn't necessarily feel right, and it doesn't necessarily give you that confidence that it really understands where you're coming from. So yeah, excellent point. Someone else put that suggestion we mentioned a little bit earlier. There's the danger we become too reliant. Yeah, and I think if a team leader only uses AI to look at their TED reports, there is that danger they might miss something, or that they're not sort of learning themselves and developing themselves as they go through it. So we're not necessarily building that capability that we want to do through TED. Any from yourself, Sam? I noticed you put one in there.
Yeah, I just put if you were working with a team leader, you would manage how those messages were delivered, perhaps try and refocus them. AI isn't going to do that. They're not going to sugarcoat it.
Yeah, definitely. Something a lot of this sometimes is around the language you use and trying to present it in the right way, particularly if teams are feeling stretched and there's that talk of burnout and teams feeling challenged. Just putting to them sort of very quite blunt suggestions sometimes might not be well received. So it's thinking around how can you be quite tactful around how you build up to this, what's the correct approach. And I guess to some extent it is around how you ask the questions within AI. And I think what seems to be coming through in the things that you're suggesting, both in the strengths and weaknesses, that there is room for us to be able to guide team leaders on what are the right sorts of questions, when's the right time to use AI, when are the wrong times to use AI as well. So I think this is definitely going to be one of the outputs of today's sort of event, in thinking around, okay, what is that support we put in, whether it is a toolkit guide or a YouTube resource or something we can put into our training programs and support that we offer to team leaders. Any others before we move on?
I just put, you know, AI could really get it wrong.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it's, I suppose it's looking at the responses with that pinch of salt and still sort of trusting your gut feeling on it sometimes, and understanding where the AI might have got it wrong as well. Fab. Okay, so finally we'll move on to the opportunities and threats. So again, from a team leader's perspective or a team's perspective, what are the opportunities? Where can teams use TED, do you think? I've shown you some examples in my demo earlier on, but are there any other ways you think a team could use AI with TED? So yeah, definitely agree, Sam, that one around saving time. And I think that's often the biggest challenge we have with a lot of teams with TED, that they just don't have that time to be able to engage or to be able to give it the time that maybe it needs or it deserves. So any way that we can sort of shave some time off the analysis or off the prepping for a feedback session, hopefully frees up a team leader's capacity, and that, I guess, the sort of mental bandwidth as well, alongside all the other things that they might be dealing with in their busy roles. Some of those that we've got in here, give them ideas they might not think of. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so even in the example that I showed you, I pulled out certain little things, but there were things that I didn't pick up at that first glance with that TED. So AI is quite thorough in terms of how it goes through it. And definitely in the examples we talked about from our perspective as practitioners, when we're faced with really big chunks of data, then this can really help. And I think from a team leader's perspective, especially if you're in one of those really big teams where there's an awful lot of free text comments, it can be really hard to pick out what are the themes in there. So I think there's definitely an opportunity for those larger teams to use AI as a way of summarizing what are the key things that are coming across in our free text comments. Synthesizing with similar teams' results. Yeah, good point. Would anyone like to expand on that one? I was thinking how that could work.
Yeah, that was me, Dingley, and I was thinking similarly to the opportunity for us as OD practitioners. I was thinking that managers might look at their results and think, okay, the questions are all RAG rated. That gives me some kind of benchmark about how well or not well are my team feeling about, you know, their experience of work. But they might also want to compare with similar teams. So, for example, in our specialist services division, there's a number of teams that work in a similar way just to deliver different specialisms. And it would be sensible for them to compare with other teams in that division, because they all work in a very similar way and similar size of teams, similar issues. So yeah, that might be an opportunity for them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I think some leads might have several teams under their remit. So if I was a departmental lead and I had, let's say, 4 different teams who were all doing their own TEDs, it could help me identify things that are relevant to all the teams, or where there might be good practice in some teams that could complement the work of others. So yeah, I suppose there's that potential there of, you know, synthesizing across results. I think where I'd perhaps advise caution around that is, you know, around the RAG rating. Sometimes I say to teams, and this is one of the challenges with staff survey sometimes, that when you get your RAG rating on staff survey, that is comparison against the other teams in the organisation. And sometimes that's like comparing apples and oranges, because a team in estates is very different from a team on a clinical ward or a finance team, all very different ways of working. So it's sometimes not a fair comparison to compare yourselves to other teams. So I guess it's about being mindful of, which are relevant comparisons. And ultimately, what we want to do with TED is create that continuous improvement process so teams can compare themselves against themselves and get that sort of self-reflection involved in there. But yeah, good suggestion. I can see where that could work. Any others standing out to you, Sam? That come in and you put a few on yourself.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
Whiteboard happy today. Just that, I think we mentioned it before, but that potentially someone who they could have some form of transactional interaction with if they are looking at their report and they can't speak to someone in OD. You've just mentioned that idea of if you have a manager with multiple teams, could it help them to compare across? And that could give them an idea for, well, what one action could I do that would help all my teams in my department? That might help them. And then I've just put, at the moment, we often think, perhaps maybe I'm wrong, like think about the quantitative column questions and then think about the qualitative questions. And I'm just wondering if AI can give us a bit of a deeper level of analysis of looking at both together.
Yeah, excellent points. Definitely. Yeah, so I think what that highlights is there are opportunities to use this. There are ways it can enhance what teams do with TED. So finally, let's move on to the threats. So from a team perspective, what I guess are the dangers of using AI, and what are the pitfalls which might be there for a team or a team leader who's using AI alongside this? I think we've touched on a few as we've discussed today, but just pop your ideas in there. Let us know what sorts of things you're thinking. So yeah, I can see, what's that one, Sam, that you've just typed in there?
Halfway through and I don't know what I'm saying, so I'll try and say it out loud. I'm a bit of a verbal learner. So if a team leader takes advice from AI and it doesn't go well, what could be the consequence of that? Could they come, if we encourage them to use AI, is there some accountability there? Don't know.
Yeah,
what if
I think
AI got hacked and it was telling you all sorts of rotten advice?
I suppose that there is the danger that then team leaders feel that they're sort of outsourcing that accountability or responsibility to AI, and that if something did go wrong, they'd then say, oh, well, the AI suggested this. So there's the danger that, I think it's that thing about being too reliant on it again. And I can see someone else has put people taking it literally and not sense checking with others. So yeah, definitely think that's an important one to be aware of, and to if we are suggesting team leaders use this, asking them to guard against that, and maybe asking someone else to read through it as well as that second pair of eyes. Yeah, what else have we got there? Yeah, could be more damaging due to not always being 100% accurate. Yeah, I totally agree with that one as well. That the danger with AI is it presents it in a way that looks like fact, and the reality is all AI is doing is pulling information from the internet, from its database, and there's the danger that could come from a source that isn't legitimate or that isn't robust in the way that it's done it. And that's why something we've thought about is maybe how AI could build on the existing TED toolkits, so that we know that it has been sense checked, and that it is research backed, and it's things that are sort of useful for a team leader to use. And I think that's something we would like to explore, definitely, around how we can enhance what we've already got in TED with that. What's one in the middle there? Minority voices may not be given sufficient attention. It might reflect existing marginalisation of people with protected characteristics. Yeah. Was that yourself, Justine? I think I saw you typing away there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking again about people who, because AI, it's very good at looking for patterns and trends, and it tends to focus on, the main themes. I was thinking about those people who perhaps have a different view and perhaps have a different experience. Those voices might not get pulled through by AI into, their insights and findings. And then I was thinking about, well, who are the people who might have different experiences and different opinions? And that actually might be people who are already marginalised. And as a threat to the organisation. That could be groups of people who've got particular protected characteristics, and by using AI, we're further marginalising those people. That is a risk to the organisation, isn't it? You might actually lose those people in your organisation.
Definitely, and I think that is a big risk that we need to be cautious of with AI. I read an article a while ago now around AI being used as part of recruitment, and because those recruitment programs were basing the selection process on previous organizational data, there's the danger that it will just select people for recruitment who already fit the mold of the organization, fit the sort of historical sort of characteristics of the organization. And the challenge with that is that could restrict diversity and bringing in new ideas and new backgrounds, new people to the organization. So there is that big risk if we become over reliant on this. And I guess it's important to just guard against that with TED, if we're using it in that way. Any others, Sam, before we wrap up this bit?
No, but I just really think that is a really good point. So thank you, Justin. I have added just into another opportunity. How could AI be used live in the feedback session? So is it just about the team leader, or actually, if you're having your discussions and you've got to a point where you're looking at the resources question, is a really good one because it always stumps everybody. How could it be used live if you're in the moment, to say, do we have any questions that we're not sure about? Yeah, well, so I'm just wondering if that could be a different way.
Yeah, great point. And I think that comes back to what you were saying earlier around making it more fun, or re-engaging a team who's maybe they've done TED lots and they're just finding it a bit samey every time they do it. So one sort of spin on it could be, let's use AI in this, and let's have a bit of a laugh at the things it gets wrong, but let's take on board some of the suggestions it gives and get us thinking differently around some of the things we do. Excellent. Fab. Okay, so thank you everyone to input into that. We are coming to the end of today's session, so I'm going to come back to my slides just to sort of wrap up. But that's been really useful, and I think, as I say, the things you've put in there and helped us discuss there, I think that's going to shape some of the resources and the support that we sort of target around this going forward, because I think, like it or not, AI is here and it is going to be out there. People are going to be using it more and more. So the more we can, I guess, guide that into a way that is useful for ourselves and for teams, the better the outcomes are going to be with that. And I think something we'd like you to think about is start trying this yourselves and with teams who you feel are ready for this. And I think our intention is to revisit this conversation at one of our deep dive events next year. And hopefully you can bring along the stories of what's worked and new ideas and new things that are working, and also those stories of where maybe it hasn't worked and where we need to be really cautious and provide that wraparound support around it. But thank you, everyone. That's been really insightful and really useful. Okay, so just to sort of signpost you to our feedback, I hope you found today's session really useful. So you can access our feedback report if you either scan the AI code, and I think Lindsay's going to pop something in the chat with a link to it if you prefer to click on the link. But in there's just 3 or 4 questions. Give us feedback on today's event. We really do value your feedback, and your feedback sort of shapes what we put on in these events and sort of how we run them. So we want to make it useful for you and your teams as well, so that you can keep supporting them. So let us know if you've any ideas for future events, if there's anything you'd like to build on, or any more information you'd like about today's event, and we'll do our best to support you in any way that we can. So in terms of next steps, what we'll be doing, we'll collate those outputs. So we've got the whiteboards, and we'll also be contacting you. We might have reached out to some of you already for our next round of catch-up meetings. So if you haven't got one in the diary, watch out for that email. Lindsay or the TED inbox will be emailing you to see when you're available, and either Sam or I will check in to see how you're doing. We'll also be developing resources around AI, so we'll be keen to share those with you as soon as we've got them. And we'll also share those other new toolkit resources that I showcased at the start of today For yourselves, we'd encourage you to keep sharing your ideas, ask us questions that will help us keep thinking about the resources we do, and perhaps have a go at using AI and see how it feels for you, so you can feed into future events that we have. And then also think about your TED goals for 2025. We've got our new data hub, your dashboards that are on there. Have a think about how you might use those, how it can complement the work that you do, and send you to new heights in 2025 with TED. A little bit on our calendar. So we haven't yet sent the invites out for next year. So over the next week or so, we'll be sending those out. But just to signpost you to our next coffee catch-up event, which is on Wednesday, the 8th of January. Our next lunch and learn is at the end of January on Monday, the 27th. And our quarterly deep dive is first one of 2025 is on the 17th of March. So we'd love to see you all there if you're available. On the slide deck that we'll be sending you out with this, we'll also send this, which is our list of events for next year. So you can hopefully reserve those dates in your diary. If you're free, we'd love to see you. And I suppose the one to point out there are accreditation fast track. If you've any new colleagues to your team who would benefit from that accreditation training, we now run half-day sessions for new practitioners or anyone else that you feel would benefit from that sort of training. You know, come along with me to see how the TED approach is applied and sort of get involved with that. So we've 4 dates for the new year, but let us know if anyone would benefit from that and we can get them booked in. And then finally, just as we come to an end, just to say another massive thank you. It's been great to have you all on the call today. Lovely to see you all. And thanks for contributing today. And thanks for everything this year. It really has been a great year for TED. And we owe a lot of that to the people who are in this room and those of you that might be watching on video as well. Everybody that's in our TED collaborative. So we wish you a very Merry Christmas. Enjoy your festive break and have a happy new year. And we'll see you all in 2025. Thanks a lot, everyone. See you soon.
Thank you.